everybody. Welcome to another Author Spotlight Book Nook. I have the pleasure today to be sitting here with Brielle D. Porter, author of her upcoming novel, Jester. It is a kind of magic, enemies to lovers. I kind of thought of it as Alice in Wonderland goes to Vegas, but I'll let Brielle talk more about her book in her words. Thank you so much for coming today.
So Jester is my story of, it's totally Las Vegas meets Alice in Wonderland. I love that. I've got my main character, Lisette, who is set in a world where everyone has magic but her. And we've got illusions and sleight of hand, and it's all, the magic is used for entertainment. And Lisette wants to be the best entertainer in the land, the Queen's Jester. And so she's competing without magic and against some pretty interesting odds. So that is my book in a nutshell.
I love it. And could you tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, so I live in North Idaho, actually born and raised in Seattle. So North Idaho is a big change for me. I run and I beekeep because someone told me once that you should have hobbies that you hate more than writing. And so those are the two I picked. So yeah, it's pretty much it.
I love that, hobbies that you hate more than writing.
I think it's definitely.
Oh, well, especially because to write a novel and then to edit a novel and to go through all the stages to get it out there, it is a labor of love. It is a lot of work.
Definitely.
And when does Jester come out?
So Jester comes out August 9th, 2022. So we're about a month away.
Oh, that's so exciting. So today we're going to be talking about the enemies to lovers trope, which is quite prevalent in your novel, and also touch on the deadly magic that you introduce with your characters. So to get started, what was your inspiration for this novel?
So I grew up reading the Chosen One trope, and, it's in everything. You have Luke Skywalker, you have all that. And I grew up and I was like, I expected that life would be like that Chosen One trope, that we're all, special. We're going to gain magical powers. And when I realized that I was actually quite ordinary and not special, that was like hugely disappointing. And then I realized that most people are ordinary doing extraordinary things. And that actually resonated with me a lot more than special people doing special things. And so I wanted to write a story about a girl who's ordinary, but through her wits and her ambition and her drive, she's able to do extraordinary things, even though she's just a normal person.
Oh, and I love that. And I love how you really heightened that in your novel, because she's surrounded by not just extraordinary people who are like a little bit better at her than in math, but, magical people who have these incredible abilities. And I really love how you show she holds her own against those big magic users because she has the drive and she has I think she wants it more in a way.
Yeah. Definitely. And that was something else that I've learned, is sometimes you have to work 10 times harder to be barely good enough. And that was a really hard lesson for me. But once I learned that that's not necessarily a bad thing, and it's good to learn to work harder, it's good to want things, it's good to have competition. It pushes us to be better and to try harder. And it's very, very humbling. And so I really tried to put a lot of that into Lisette's character growth and her arc. So
amazing. Yeah. And it's a good one we all need to learn. We don't all get to be the Harry Potters and Dorothys and Luke Skywalkers of the world.
It's very, very few people like that, I found.
Yes. Yeah. And if anything, it makes her story all the more rewarding when she does do well.
Definitely.
So tell me more about the role romance plays in your novel.
So initially, when I was writing this book, it was just going to be about the competition. And when I wrote Luke's character, it was the funniest thing, because normally I have everything planned out, but I just felt this like romantic tension between them. And I was like, oh, I like where this is going. And so I always tell people that my book is the Prestige if the Prestige were enemies to lovers. So you have these two very, very obsessive, neurotic characters, but they're also very, very attracted to each other. And it adds a whole other level and dynamic to these two characters, because they're already a little kooky. I think somebody described them once as scary. My characters are very scary, but when you add that romance dynamic, it gives them this whole other conflict and tension to their relationship, because not only are they competing against each other and their rivals, but they also care for each other. And so it was really fun to write that.
Oh, yeah, when they're both trying to be the best, but they're getting more and more vulnerable around each other. So it's kind of like, oh no, now you kind of know my stage secrets. And is that a good thing for our relationship? Yes. Is it a good thing for my career? Probably not.
And it's like, what do you eventually, I wanted that to be a choice for them both to make, what's more important, your relationship or this ambition and drive that you have. And so both of them kind of have a different but similar choice to make in that regard. So
Oh, I love that. And then what advice would you give either authors starting out or authors wanting to take on a popular romance trope like one, actually specifically enemies to lovers, because that's quite a unique one.
yeah. So I think with tropes, a lot of times people will do them because they're trendy, or, they hear, oh, this trope's popular right now. But I did enemies to lovers because I like that trope. I like reading it. I love writing it. It made it so fun to write. And so I believe that if you're going to pick a trope, you should enjoy writing it. Don't just do it because it's a trendy trope or because you think that's what agents or publishers want to read. Because honestly, the tropes don't matter. It's how you tell the story. And so enemies to lovers for me, I love books like the Cruel Prince series is one of my all-time favorites. And so there's a kind of a similar dynamic there for Luke and Lisette. And so writing that book was like, it was like fanfic for me, because I got to take this trope that I just love the heck out of and write my own version of it. And so it was almost like fanfic of the trope, if that makes sense, and get to do my own version of one of my favorites.
Oh, fantastic. And yeah, well, especially writing, you have to go through and read it a lot and you have to edit it a lot. So you might as well like what you've written.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't.
Oh, exactly. And how do you balance that line between enemies and lovers to make the development of Lisette and Luke's relationship satisfying to read for the readers?
So that was a fun one, because the enemies part is fun, but I always wanted I think there's a quote that says in a romance, you should always know that the characters are into each other without having to see them kiss. And if you have to see them kiss, then it's not a true romance. The kiss should be the culmination of the romance. It should be really satisfying. We should know that they want it and need it. It shouldn't be proof that they like each other. And so as I was writing that relationship, I wanted you to know from the beginning that they liked each other, even when they were totally anti, each other. And so it was really fun to kind of weave in subtly these little clues and details that showed that they were attracted to each other and into each other, while still keeping them resentful and rivals, ultimately rivals. And so I balanced the enemies part by giving them both really, really good motivations. Luke has a really good motivation for wanting to be the best. He wants to help redeem his father. And then Lisette, they're similar motivations. Lisette wants to be the best because she's got some vulnerable backstory where she never felt valued or appreciated. And so she's always trying to prove herself. And so she wants to be the best for those reasons. And also she has some family issues she would like to put behind her. So
yeah, I love that, because she really seems like a character who has a lot to prove, not only to others, but I think a lot to herself. I mean, growing up, and we won't give any spoilers, but growing up in a household where she doesn't get much feedback from someone she really admires that she is doing well and her accomplishments do mean something. It's kind of like, well, how do we get that sense of admiration? Is it through applause? Is it through, being the best and having the queen name you as her number one jester?
yeah, exactly. I think a lot of us can relate to that. Wanting approval, wanting validation, and not knowing the right places or how to seek that or get it. And so for Lisette, that was a big motivator for her, was just feeling like she was never good enough and having to prove something to everyone. So she kind of goes about it in not always the best ways.
Yeah, well, we had a talk earlier this year about the morally gray character, and she does tend to toe that line of, do I agree with you a little bit, but do I like how you got there? Maybe not.
Yeah, it was really fun to write, because I feel like we all feel that, like, oh, if I could do anything, then I would do this. We have the fantasy when we're mad at someone of what you really would do. But, it's fun to write a character that actually would do those things, because it's like, wow, she's very, very making poor choices, but makes for good reading.
Exactly. Yeah. And we can live vicariously through her, but we don't have to make her choices.
Exactly.
And so you mentioned before that when Lizette and Luke kind of start to recognize that they have feelings for each other, it is a choice they have to make, because they can't have their cake and eat it too. They can't both be the best, and they can't then both be together. So how would you say love changes each of your characters?
So love is a big theme in this book. Lisette is really, really, I wouldn't say selfish, but she's really self-oriented. She's always worried about, how she can be the best. And it's very this me-centric viewpoint. And then when she meets Luke and starts to have this relationship with him, when she meets Killian, her mentor, and starts to have a relationship with him, and Yasmin and the Queen, I put all these different characters in her life so that she would have to be forced to look outward and realize that there's more to life than just these things that she wants, and that with other people, you can become a better person and you can achieve your goals in a better, more constructive way. And with Luke, the dynamic between them was I wanted them to be better together, because they both are really strong characters. They're both great on their own, but together they bring a whole new strength. And at the end, I wanted to show that they kind of came together and they're a better team than they were individually, and they're better people for it. They kind of learned, both of them, to look outside themselves a little bit, because Luke's he's not quite as selfish as Lisette, but he's pretty good. So I wanted them to kind of have love change them to be a little less selfish than they were and better people. So hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. And I do love, especially with her mentor, Killian. Yes.
Mhm.
I love that he almost at the beginning at least starts to begrudgingly like her. It's kind of like, no, I'm not supposed to like her, but well, that was actually kind of funny what she said, or
he was fun to write. I really wanted to take that mentor trope and kind of turn it on its head. So he's not an old man, but he is kind of a curmudgeon. He's a young guy, and his characters, he's totally a cinnamon roll. Like, he acts tough, but he's really soft inside. And so I wanted him to kind of soften Lisette's rough edges and show that she is a likable character for all her flaws. There's people that like her and realize that she's got her good sides, and Killian kind of brings it out in her.
yeah, and she gives him, I think, kind of gumption in a way too. So they have things to learn from each other, which is, you don't often see that in the mentor student role, where the mentor also then gets to learn a few things on the side.
Yeah, definitely. And I think being young helps with that too. So he's not old and world weary at this point. So
Exactly. And so in the novel, the novel Jester does feature a lot of death-defying magic and a lot of very fantastical magic that the performers will do to hopefully become the Queen's Jester. So the stakes feel quite dire, even though, because there's the magic element, death is less final. So how did you work or balance your magic system in your world?
So that was a hard thing to write, because I had to figure out a way. I'm like, okay, I gave Luke that power where he basically can resurrect himself. And it's like, how do I keep the stakes high when he has, because, you all read the novel where they go into battle and you're like, okay, but they're going to heal themselves. So who cares? And you don't care as much. And so I had to really be conscious when I was writing his character to not make him invincible and not a Superman. He had to have, some way that his magic might not always come through to save him if he goes too far, if he pushes the boundaries of what he's capable of. And so the magic had to have limits. So he can resurrect himself, but if he waits too long, and I tried to really show that at the beginning. I think in the first chapter, there's a girl who volunteers for a show that he couldn't bring back. And so that kind of shows you that his magic isn't all powerful. He can't always succeed, including with himself. And I think he mentions that too, that he has a phobia of that, that one day he might screw up and not come back. And I think, you know, as young adults, a lot of times, especially I feel like with teenage guys, they do feel invincible. And I wanted to kind of give him a little bit of that. And so showing that he has limits and that he's afraid of those limits kind of makes it a little more dire, I think, than it would have been if he was just like, I can always heal myself. It's amazing.
And actually, I think while I was reading it, I really loved how we had stage Luke, and then we had this very vulnerable, very scared. I think you're right. He is quite scared of his power in a lot of ways, Luke, that we get glimpses of. And as his and Lizette's relationship grows, we get more and more of the actual Luke and less of the stage Luke. And then you really start to realize, oh my goodness, he is so incredibly playing with fire to get the applause and to get his fame up. While with Lisette, we know that she kind of needs to figure out her limits. We kind of learn about Luke that he needs to figure out his as well.
Definitely. Yeah,
Oh,
I like that you brought that up, because that was something that I really wanted to play with, because I do feel like a lot of performers have that stage persona, and it's very, very different from their actual persona. And a lot of times they're putting aside anxieties and fears and that they actually have. Because I always thought, you know, some people are born to do that. They just get up on stage. That's not one of my things. I hate public speaking. But the more people I've met that do that, you talk to them and they hate like one-on-one social interaction. It's like they come alive on the stage, but you know, in real life, they're an anxious mess like the rest of us, you know? So it's just, we have different strengths. And so it was a fun way to kind of play into Luke and give him a little more dimension than he had originally. So.
Yeah, or else it would be easy to disregard him as kind of a vain, flashy circus boy.
Exactly.
Who in my mind is very handsome.
Definitely. I got a soft spot for Luke.
And what is your favorite quote or scene that you wrote, and why?
So my favorite scene, so all the scenes were really fun. I got to do a lot of research on stage magic. I've always been interested in it, but I didn't know a lot about it. So I researched everything from fire eating. I read about these fire eaters in Mexico who go do it at gas stations to earn money. And I researched sword swallowing, all this amazing stuff. But my favorite scene to write is when they're at this, like, it's not a ball, but it's like a dinner for the Queen's chosen performers. And Luke kind of tricks Lisette into going. She thinks she's one of the special performers. And then she gets there and he's like, haha, JK, you're not. And so she kind of now has this chance to get back at him and kind of prove herself to the Queen. And so she ends up putting on kind of a show. I won't go into too many details, but it was one of my favorite scenes to write because there's so many different feelings going on. You've got her budding romance with Luke, where she's super angry at him for doing this to her, but she's also like kind of into him, but doesn't realize it yet. And then Luke is into her. And that's one of the pivotal scenes where we realize that they are into each other. That end of that scene, I got to kind of leave as a little cliffhanger and show that they have this budding romance. So it was just super fun to write.
I'm glad you brought that up. And yeah, I'll be very careful not to spoil it, because I know I love the novelty of the trick that she does with the Queen. It was, and just how succinct the name of the trick was. It was very like kind of, oh, it was very sexy. Like it was like, this is cool.
That's what I was going for. I'm glad it worked.
It worked well. Yeah, I think that was that scene. And then I really loved the scene where she is chatting with the lion tamer, Yasmin. Yes, I just in her room, and you get this really beautiful moment of two performers kind of leveling with each other. And I think it's one of the first scenes what we get where Lisette is really made aware that she does actually have to care about other people, and when she lets other people down, it can hurt them. I liked that one too.
That's awesome. I'm glad you like pointed that out. I really liked Yasmin's character. She was kind of my tribute to all the Las Vegas animal performers, because that's kind of one of the main things you see. But she ended up being a lot more complex than she was originally just supposed to be a little side character that pops in, and she ended up like becoming this best friend to Lisette. And like you said, giving her a reason to care about other people and to realize that her actions don't just affect her, they affect other people. So that's cool that you pointed that out.
And so, like we mentioned before, there's a lot of magic in your world. What magical gift would you want to have, whether it's so that you can be an amazing performer or just to have in your day-to-day life, and why?
So I would probably pick Luke's, but not because I want to be a performer. So, you know, he can heal himself. I'm actually super phobic about like germs and stuff. And so just knowing like if I get sick or whatever, I could heal myself anytime and not worry, like, or heal other people. I've got 3 little boys, so that would be super useful. So that's probably what
very useful. Yeah. And plus you're a beekeeper. So I'm guessing there are stings that happen. Maybe that would be nice to just not have to worry about.
Yes, exactly. I'm lucky I wear a full bee suit and I haven't been stung yet, but it'll happen. It'll happen.
Well, knock on wood, it won't happen because we just jinxed it.
You never know. I expect it fully.
Was there a favorite magical gift that you liked to write about?
So Lisette's gift that she gets from her father ended up being a really fun one to write because it's super creepy and it added kind of a cool horror element, her ability to raise the dead. And I just had a lot of fun with those scenes, like playing with the people that she sees and raises, along with her kind of selfishness. So she's raising these people from the dead, and that kind of helps her again to look outside of herself and to be like, wow, you know, I have this gift that I can actually use to help people instead of just myself, you know. And so those scenes were really fun to write. I had a lot of fun with that.
Oh, and I like what you said, how it did at some points expose her selfishness, because there was one, I can't remember if it was in the graveyard or later, where she's kind of just practicing with what she has. She doesn't know what she has. And she brings back someone and kind of just disregards their last word. And it's like, oh, shoot, make it stop. And then this person who's like, this is my last chance to get my dying words out, is just kind of forgotten. I think it was a woman, but I just remember going, Lisette, write it down or something.
Yeah, no, she's only wants it for how it can help her at first. And so you kind of see that transformation throughout the story where the more people she brings back, then she sees the little boy with his grandmother and she's like, oh my gosh, these are real people. They only get to come back once. And it starts to have more meaning, this gift that her father had to her.
Yeah, and it's wonderful that she does kind of grow up in that sense too. What was something you added to your novel that you geek out about, but readers may not pick up on?
Well, let's see. There's a couple little Easter eggs in there. Killian, his character, actually, I named after Cillian Murphy, who's one of my all-time favorite actors. And I kind of based the character off of him. Just kind of like a secret little thing for me. Just it was fun because I thought if he were this character, he'd be the perfect version of that. So that was just one of those things I put in there for me. But it's like if people notice, that'd be cool too, you know. That was probably one of my favorite things that I slipped in there. You know, it's like most things you write with the intent for the reader to read them, and some things you do just for you, you know, like because you know it'll be more fun to write it. So.
Oh, I love that. And where can readers find your book, and where can we find you online?
Yeah, so my book is sold on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, I think, IndieBound, and camcatbooks.com. It's going to be hitting retailers August 9th, 2022. And then I am on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is @Briellums, just old high school joke. Anyway.
Fantastic. So I will put all that information in the little thing down below, and I'll also put it with the newsletter that's going to go along with this interview. But thank you so much for taking the time. It's been an absolute treat chatting with you about Jester.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan.